Have you ever wanted to say, look, Ma, I'm in magazines? Well, how do you do that? How do you get into magazines, whether they be print, whether they be digital, and can you still post on your social media while you're doing it? How do we navigate that landscape? Well, today's guest, Dan Rubinstein of The Grand Tourist, an 11-year podcast, an amazing website at thegrandtourist.net, is going to tell us his thoughts, and you're going to want to stick around for that because he is nothing short of amazing. Stay tuned. Hey kids, and welcome to Designed by Wingnut Social. I'm your host, Darla Powell, and today's guest is amazing. He's my best friend, and he doesn't know it yet, and that is Dan Rubinstein. And I said Rubinstein during the interview because I'm basically an idiot. But in my defense, he didn't correct me, so... Anywho, he is a fellow Star Wars and Marvel geek, just an aside, but more than that, he's a brilliant PR guy, a brilliant publicist, a brilliant criticizer of interior design. He put that in his bio. And you know the drill. Here is his bio. For more than 25 years, Dan Rubinstein has been a writer, editor, and consultant based in New York, specializing in design, art, and culture. His podcast, The Grand Tourist with Dan Rubinstein, recently began its 11th season of in-depth episodes exploring art, design, style, and travel. Prior to The Grand Tourist, he was the home and design director at Departures. When I asked him on his intake what's his area of expertise, he put design criticism, interiors, and publishing. And I know you guys are going to love him as much as I did on this interview. All right, Dan. Remember, we're besties. Okay, guys, help me in welcoming Dan Rubinstein to the show. Hey there, Dan Rubinstein. Welcome to the show. How the hell are you?
I'm pretty damn good. How are you?
I am pretty freaking amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. I don't normally do video. I don't never do video with my podcast. So I'm the Grand Tourist. So this is quite the experience for me.
So you're touring the video. You're touring this whole video experience. It takes a minute to get used to, but you know, it's really, you should.
It is. It is. Yeah. I mean, my guests are from all different walks of life, from all over the world. Sometimes they're makeup ready, and many times they are not. So, the last person I interviewed that speaks to this was Patti LuPone, who when we turned on the interview, her camera was off, and I was like, "Hey, Patti, do you want to turn on the camera, perhaps, so just so I can see you?" And she was like, "Oh, honey, I'm in bed."
Okay, first of all,
I was like, that's okay. And so we had a beautiful chat with her sitting up in bed, but it was not going to be okay for video for her and for many other my guests. So first, I'm very jealous that you've been able to pull that off.
Patti LuPone, my God, I just died a little bit. I am obsessed. I love her so much. And I know you and I were talking in the green room how we're fellow Disney, Marvel, Star Wars aficionados. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see Agatha All Along yet.
Oh, yes. It came out, the episode that I did with her came out the first day that it debuted. And
brilliant.
I would recommend any fan of the show to listen to that episode. She's kind of everything you want her to be. She's exactly what there's no filter on her, and she was to be the first person to admit that. But she's amazing. She's absolutely wonderful.
So anyway, Agatha All Along, highly recommend it. I know it's WandaVision was one of my favorites. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but Agatha All Along is so good. Anyway,
yes,
very jealous.
Yes. I mean, I could say I interviewed Patti LuPone from my rental in Fire Island, so I can say that was the gayest thing that has ever happened to me, and probably will be the gayest thing I will ever do is to interview Patti LuPone from Fire Island.
Well, I'm Darla Powell, and I approve this message. Terrific. I love it. So you're kind of a big deal. You probably have many leather-bound books. So your podcast is The Grand Tourist.
Yes. So for those who don't maybe know me or know the podcast, I've been doing design editorial for well over 20 years. I started my career at Condé Nast's, the original American version of House & Garden, working in the design department there. I bounced around for a while, and I landed at a magazine called Surface, which some people might remember, and I was editor-in-chief there for a few years. And then fast forward a little bit, I found myself at Departures magazine as the home and design director for 6 years. And when the magazine folded during the pandemic, I was already working on a podcast is a fun, creative outlet for myself in lockdown to kind of connect with designers and architects and people from the world of style. And I thought it was either that or finger painting. And so I just decided, let's do a podcast instead. And then when the magazine sadly closed during the pandemic, I already had a full season recorded, more or less. So I just kind of ran with the ball, and
Nice.
it just kind of became my life. And here I am 3.5 years later. We're in the middle of season 11.
That's
kicked
a
off with Patty
great
LaPone.
run.
So what can I say?
That is a great run. Congrats for that.
Thank you.
And you guys can find out more about The Grand Tourist at thegrandtourist.net, and of course on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And we want to talk today about PR and getting into print, getting into magazines, and how that landscape has changed with everything being so digital, right? We've covered this topic before, but it's been a couple of years, and it's exponential, the way everything's growing. And so I wanted to pick your brain on, is it still, the relevancy, I should say, on getting your design projects into actual print magazines versus getting online, how that landscape has changed. So are you game for this convo?
Sure, absolutely.
Alrighty,
this is my bread and butter. I know that's what I know all about.
Right, of course. So let's just dig in. So how has it changed? And I'm going to have some follow-up questions depending on our conversation here. So just talk to me a little bit about that.
So one of my first jobs was assisting the design editor at House and Garden, and he would, all of the, I would say, interior designer pitches came through him and came through me as his assistant, and we would go through all of the pitches, which were all mailed in to us with photos and things like that. Very little was done digitally those days. My boss, Mayor Russ, who's now the West Coast editor at AD, he would, go out with a digital with a film camera, take a bunch of scouting shots, and come back from a long trip and hand me, a small bag full of film rolls, and I would go and get them turned into slides, and we would have a big meeting where we would go over all of the slides, and we did all of the way that magazines were used to be done for decades and decades. Today, obviously, things have changed. There are not as many magazines and not as many outlets. I would say the big shift that I think when it comes to interior designers is that in the past, a designer just sort of needed to do their job. They needed to get clients and make themselves happy, but there was they didn't have to market themselves in the way that they do now. So when it comes to getting published, the big shift now is that the burden to photograph and to style and to document your own work falls now on the designer. It doesn't fall on the magazine. There are still a few magazines where it's their responsibility to photograph the space in the way that they like it. But by and large, 80 to 90% of your press will probably be using photography that you commissioned, you styled, you paid for, and that, you were managing. So,
I see.
And when you combine that with, the era of Instagram, that's what I would say is the big shift, is that the shift is now firmly in either in a designer or their publicist, rather than just, I'm going to sell it to a magazine and then they're going to make me into a star. Now it's really your responsibility as the designer to do that, which is a hard thing to hear because it's quite expensive. I mean, good photography
it's incredibly
is
expensive.
everything, and it is very expensive.
So that's you're seeing more of a shift from, Architectural Digest they love a project. They're just going to send out maybe Architectural Digest is a little different, but generally magazines are going to send out their own photographer crew and they're going to stage it and they're going to put everything together. So now it's more beholding to that interior designer to make sure that's all done and present that package to the magazine. That's more occurring more.
Yes. So now, especially with digital, when you have a place, you have a project, you've shot it, you've styled it, you've selected the best photos, you then need those photos you might need those photos if you're pitching to a major magazine. To others, they'll just use the photos that you took, especially if you use the right people to do it.
Okay.
There's nothing worse than having a big project, using the wrong photographer and stylist, showing the magazine the images that you've paid for, and then being like, ooh, this is great, but maybe not for us. And really what they might just mean is, we don't like these photos as they are. So sometimes if you have a really important project and there is a magazine that you want to pitch to, putting AD and Elle decor, let's say, aside, what might be good is to look through your favorite magazines and try to find one that, you like, a regional or anything like that, and write down all of the names and contact the people, the photos that run the best. And then contact them. You want to make sure you're using the right talent, not just a random real estate photographer or somebody else.
Which a lot of us do. I mean, I did that in the beginning for my design firm. I did a real estate photographer because I didn't really know. So I'm sure that our audience, after 5 years of our podcast here, has kind of grown into not using real estate photographers, right? So what do you think? Why do you think magazines are less inclined to make that investment in their own photography and sending them out? Like you said, Elle decor and Architectural Digest aside. What do you think has contributed to that shift?
Oh, it's just simply the degradation of the publishing industry.
Okay.
As a profitable enterprise.
Yeah, that's where I was getting at. Yeah.
It is purely about the numbers. And I think, for some magazines, they're like, well, if you're hiring the same photographer that we're going to use, the photos are going to come out the same, more or less. Even the days of having an editor on set for these shoots,
right.
That's also kind of not as prevalent as it used to be. So even if a photographer hires the same photographer that you would with the same stylist that you would, the photo shoot will turn out the exact same because there's no editor on set kind of like directing things possibly. But for many people, they're looking at maybe there's like a regional edition of Lux, or there's another kind of glossy magazine or a newspaper, or there's so many different outlets. And you also have to think about your own portfolio, your website, Instagram. So you really, documenting your work properly and owning those photographs and having arrangements with photographers to make sure that when the magazine says, hey, can we use these pictures? Right. The photographer doesn't turn around and say, oh, there's an extra fee involved. You really want to be able to purchase those fees outright.
Yeah, that is huge. And you've mentioned Instagram twice now, and I'm glad, because that's what we do here at Wingnut Social. We are a marketing agency, and our primary focus is marketing interior designers on Instagram. And it's been so impactful and so important for interior designers to grow their business and to get that reach and to even get the attention of magazines or brand collaborations. And it used to be, and I'm assuming it still is, you'll straighten me out if I'm wrong, that if you were pitching a room or a project to a magazine, they would, if they saw it on your social, if they saw it in your stories, that'd be it. Forget it. We're out. Is that still relevant? Is that still the case, or has that lessened a little?
I think it depends on the outlet.
Okay.
And I think this is also maybe a good time to have a plan when you have a project and you photograph everything. That doesn't mean you just go, oh my God, I can't wait to share this on social media.
It's hard to resist.
It's hard to resist. There is a case to be made to, taking a reel or some sort of video that is up temporarily that you're sharing a project online versus your official photographs that you're going to be posting on your website or anything like that. Patience, I think, is the thing that people have the hardest time grasping. Way back in the day, you would pitch something, it might take months to get photographed, and a magazine could hold on to that photography for years. I mean, at House and Garden, we were notorious for holding on to things for years and years before it got published.
Yeah.
And people did it because it could make or break your career. Sure. Nowadays, no one is waiting years, but you still need to have a kind of patience and just take the long road about everything. And try not to be so impatient and just say, when this is ready, we will introduce it to the world in a nice, leisurely, orderly pace that we get the biggest bang for our buck, but not to be so concerned that you're gonna be sharing it in the next couple of weeks because you could really kind of damage long-term prospects that way.
Speaking of patience, one thing you can do, and I was interviewing Corey Damon Jenkins, and he does this, and it's really brilliant. And we do this as well at Wingnut, is when you're doing your behind the scenes, your video, the things you would normally do on projects, if you can be patient a little bit and kind of hold on to those. And if you know when the article or it is getting published and maybe a couple of weeks ahead of time, you can tease with that video, that more casual video. And then here it is. Here's the big, and it looks like it's more a dopamine hit. It's more revealing at the time. If you can be patient to hold on to all that background stuff, that really works as storytelling on the social media side.
Yes, and I also think like one of the ways that things have changed is sometimes when I hear from my designer friends like what works and what doesn't, because at the end of the day, that's why they want to get published, just for things to work out, and for them to get more business. So,
of course,
one of the things that I hear sometimes is they say like, "Oh, XYZ magazine maybe is not as impactful to my career when I had an article in it, like it may be in the old days." However, certain non-traditional outlets actually do have a much bigger impact now in terms of like getting new clients. Yeah. And sometimes that's even Instagram, but sometimes that could be something like First Dibs or some sort of the editorial arm of an e-commerce engine that's in the right place. So it helps for people to think about projects and think that they can share online that are not just purely like the old-fashioned 8 to 10 page feature in a print magazine.
There's a synergy to it, right? To that approach. You have projects that maybe aren't going to be in Architectural Digest or Elle, and they just wouldn't be. They don't suit that, but they, in a local newspaper, an article in there for people reading that, or even if it's digital online, finding out about your services that you can post on Instagram, or you could do a blog about and have that as a marketing piece. There's so many things you can do with all of that content. So, but you are paying for all that photography now.
And I would also say that sometimes it helps to find partial stories. It doesn't have to be a giant mansion, right? It could be a great kitchen renovation. It could be a really great closet story. It could be some sort of color story for some sort of room. I think that's where you need to find out your local or regional outlets that maybe or even national outlets that you think do those kinds of stories, and just kind of investigate a little bit. Like, who are they, what are they showing? What are they looking for? And then maybe there's some other project that maybe you don't think could get published so easily head to toe, but might have a really great kitchen or a really great idea. And just having like a few pictures, like one kitchen, you really shoot the hell out of it, like can be quite valuable if you can get it into the right, like top kitchen renovation stories. And for sure, those things can be really valuable.
And then use it on your Instagram to show your ideal clients what you do.
Exactly. And especially if it's a partial story and it's not a whole house and it's something like that, I think those outlets will be a lot more forgiving when it comes to, has anyone in the universe seen this?
Absolutely. So let's talk about, there's something I want to pick your brain on because I'm curious, because you would have the answer to this. I see in the interior design Facebook groups a lot that interior designers are getting pitched by large home shelter magazines to advertise, to do a spread. And they're like, hey, Susan McNugget's interior designer, for $3,000, you can have a page in XX magazine. And they're making those investments for like a one-off thing in a magazine because it's prestigious, right? Susan McNuggets wants to be in this magazine. Where my thoughts are is to take that same $3,000 and do a digital marketing campaign for 3 months, and you're going to get much more return on investment because it's not repeatable unless you're doing that every month, right? And you're having those touch points in there. I'm just curious to see, is that an impactful way of getting into a magazine? Does that do anything? Does that cause any connections or anything for any of these designers? Because they have stars in their eyes when they get these pitches.
That's a really good question. I would say there's a lot of different similar things when it comes to not just sort of like maybe a page in a magazine, like an ad, right? Yeah. But there are also a lot of digital directories that magazines are doing as sort of a way of instead of having one big advertiser, they ask 500 people to advertise $500 a month, right? Or whatever that is. And, World of Interiors has a directory. I think AD has a directory. Some people find that really valuable. They will get inquiries that way. And it's really just a way of like having something out there, since we don't really use phone books anymore, that this is kind of a way of doing things like that. I would say in a regional, if you're in a very specialized market, like if you're in New York, I don't know if I would suggest doing that. If you were in Denver and there was a Denver Homes magazine and someone pitched something like that,
that makes more sense. Yeah,
it would make more sense. And, just like anything, you can always have a call to action in an ad, and it could just be a very special email address. Let's say it was Denver Homes Magazine. You could say Denver Homes at danrubinsteindecorating.biz, right? And see how many people come to you through that email address rather than just your name and your logo. And there's no way to know exactly how many inquiries or how many people have questions about your work that way. But yeah, digital, I think every person needs to, once you have an interior design business up and running, you really need to think about your business like Coca-Cola does. So you need to say with a smaller budget. So think about
slightly,
what is my marketing budget for 2025? How am I going to divide this? How much am I spending in print? How much am I spending in digital? How much am I spending in PR and services? How much am I spending on photography? Photography is a part of your marketing budget. What about a redesign of your website? How old is your website, and when do you have to redesign it? Yeah. Once you think about things that way, not just think about each individual initiative as some sort of random cost that is a surprise to you, that budgeting process really brings things into focus. Because if you're like, oh, $3,000 for this print ad, well, I have to make sure that I'm redoing my website at a certain point, or I really need to get my Instagram numbers up. So it's think about marketing holistically, and then I think everything else will kind of fall into place.
All right, you guys know, or at least I hope you know, or if you don't, I'm not doing my job, that we do full service social media management for you guys, interior designers, architects, and to the trade vendors or furnishing manufacturers, etc. But we are excited to announce our very new hybrid plan with Wingnut Social. It's kind of a half done for you, half you do it yourself sweet spot. If you're a beginning designer or a firm who's just really kind of getting started in social media marketing, but don't quite have the marketing budget to delegate it to a marketing firm, because that's a pretty decent size investment, right? This is our hybrid solution, and it's perfect for busy designers who the power of consistent professional content on Instagram. You've heard guest after guest and client after client say how they're getting leads from Instagram, right? But you have that overwhelm. You have no idea what to post, when to post, what the hashtags and captions should look like for a value proposition, a mix in order to reach your ideal client. Well, ta-da! Introducing the hybrid plan with Wingnut Social. You get a monthly content calendar where we create the content for you, and you post at your leisure on your own time with our guidance. We're doing the posts, we're doing feed posts, we're editing reels for you. You get 8 feed posts, 2 reels. We're writing the captions for you. We are researching the hashtags for you that drive engagement with guidance, best practices, and quarterly strategy sessions to make sure that your strategy and everything is in alignment with your business goals. So if you want to find out some more information on our amazing hybrid plan, it's been very popular so far. Head on over to wingnutsocial.com and hit up that Let's Chat button, and let's see how we can work together. Again, that's wingnutsocial.com. And I love that you mentioned like Coca-Cola, right? It's not like they've dropped their ad budget. They're the number one selling soft drink, but they still market, right? So, and interior designers will be like, oh, I get referrals or I have a full pipeline, so I'm dropping my marketing budget. But that's like the slinky dog, right? That's going to catch up with you on the tail end. You have to keep that reach and awareness out there because you'll be paying for it 6 months, 12 months down the road. If they drop their marketing budget, Pepsi would creep up. Dr. Pepper already has, right? So yeah, I love that. So
I think you're right on there.
Interior designers, when they submit their beautiful babies to a magazine, and let's say it doesn't get accepted by the print, the prestigious print, and there's several, right? And they're like, maybe this isn't a good fit for this, but we have our online digital magazine, HGTV does that, or everybody does that. They have their own digital version of that. Should interior designers be disappointed at that? Is that a downgrade or I don't think so in the digital age, but I'm curious to get your thoughts.
I would say it's not it is somewhat of a downgrade. I mean, let's just admit it, because sometimes if you have something in print, that means they're going to be spending more money on all of it. They might shoot it for you, maybe not. They might hire a writer to do a longer story. They may not. Nowadays, it's not as much of an issue. And I would say before you just kind of say, yes, of course, I would love it in print, or yes, of course, I would love it in digital, just to ask a few questions like, let whatever the magazine is, let's say, look over their website, look over their social media, look how when they create content, how are they dividing that up? So it's okay to say, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for considering this project. I just have a few questions before we move ahead. How will you promote the story? If they're like,
Right.
oh, it's just going to run in the magazine and it's going to come out in our summer issue that maybe nobody reads, and it's actually not going to go online, and so on and so forth. It's okay to ask like, hey, would a collaborative post be on Instagram be possible for the
Nice.
photos that you're going to take? Or are you going to use my photography? And if you use the photography, is there something we can do online? Or, ask questions about like how they're going to promote it. If they say, oh, well, we'll throw it up on stories, let's say in Instagram, people like, is a grid post, possible? Because if it's not running in the magazine, I would love to do X, Y, Z. Kind of like see what they do. Like, do they have a newsletter? Ask me, like, I'm just curious, like how the newsletter works. Like, how can I get this project into the newsletters? I think that would be really impactful for my business because it's probably all local people. And we'll use the Denver example.
Yeah.
So I would say like, just to gently just be curious and just say, I'm so excited. Thank you so much. Be very appreciative. But then also say like, I have some questions about the ways in which we can promote the story because I want to promote your magazine and I want my story to get as much attention as possible. So I think thinking about it like a collaboration, not just sort of like they do this story and I'm just sort of sitting back and I'm going to just be super happy with whatever they give me. I think just asking questions, sometimes the editor or whoever it is might be surprised and might be like, oh yeah, actually it would be great in the newsletter if you could maybe, we could take the same content with some photos that we took, but maybe you can answer our top 5 questions about, how to decorate a bedroom for winter or whatever
Sure.
it is. It might come, it might spur some other opportunities or ideas that the editors didn't have. So I think it's always a good idea just to ask it for a little bit more.
I love that because you're couching it in such a way as how can I help you promote this?
For sure.
But also sandwiching in how can I help you promote me?
Yeah,
and making sure
exactly,
you have backlinks or you're tagged on their social or whatever that looks like so you can get that traction from that.
Yeah, like
That's
in the
brilliant.
magazine, follow me back on Instagram. And once they do, can we do a collaborative post on the day that it comes out?
Nice.
Can we schedule that? I would love to make sure that the text that runs in the collaborative post, maybe you could do a little Google Doc and we can just kind of both approve of it before it goes live would be really great. Just to kind of plan in advance to get all the little bells and whistles, because sometimes you don't want it to be like if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? Especially if it's a local or regional, you want to make sure that you're really taking advantage of that, and that you can maybe throw in an extra privately a couple $100 to boost that post on social, on Instagram, let's say, to an extra 100,000 reach or whatever.
That would be great. Yeah, and $100 to $200 on Instagram goes a long way.
Yes.
That's terrific. That's brilliant. I love it. Dan, what else is there that you think is important for the audience to hear with this topic that you want to share with us before we get into the fire round?
Don't think about press as sort of like the end all be all of your career. Press comes organically with great projects. It comes with intention. It takes time no matter what. But exposure and marketing now is so 360. It helps to think about things in a 360 way. And you'll be much more satisfied with your career that way. And you'll probably have a better diversity of projects. You should have a plan, right? Like Apple promotes their products even when there's not a new computer to buy, right?
Yeah.
And so how are you going to promote yourself in those 6 months between projects when you don't have a new Dropbox of JPEGs to share with your favorite magazine? Like, what are you going to do? Is it going to be like an event? Is it going to be some kind of Instagram live that you're going to do once a month? Is it going to do like, what is your content plan beyond just waiting for a magazine to do it? Unfortunately, some people say that design has become a little bit of a beauty pageant. And it kind of has. So you kind of have to be like, all right, what's my miscongeniality moment? Like, what is my swimsuit going to look like? How am I, it's not just one thing anymore. It's a whole pageant.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of think about it that way.
Yeah, we find that interior designers who want to grow their brand, they have to break out of the design and be more of a lifestyle design brand. And yeah, the bathing suits, the beauty pageants, the sashes, the tiaras. Yeah.
the nonprofits, the dinners, the fundraisers, like all of that. It is, a good, we call it, in magazines and editorial, we kind of know it's an edit calendar. Like, what are you going to do? So you need a marketing calendar for whatever your design business is.
Yeah, you definitely need a strategy. You just can't go in and wing it for sure. You can wing nut it.
You could wing nut it, but you can't wing it. If you wing it, you'll just get frustrated.
100%. All right, Dan Rubinstein. Now I have to ask you, are you ready for the What Up Wingnut round?
I am.
Dan Rubinstein, what would the hashtag on your tombstone be?
Like, looks good to me. I would say like looks good to me is a really great kind of way in the role of editorial, just to be like, yep, you tried, you did your best. It is what it is. It is what it is would also be a really great hashtag. It is what it is. Yes.
You have one on each side.
You could have, it is what it is. Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
All righty, cool. You're stuck on a deserted island, but you can have your one favorite food forever. What is it?
Oh, it has to be this very specific bowl of pasta that I ate in Italy, in Positano, which is on the water. And our hosts, we were doing an episode about the famous hotel, L'Sera Nusa there, which you can listen to on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, of course. And they took us to this beach club. We have to take your little Riva boat to get there. And then we got there, and it was like spaghetti with sort of a yellow tomato sauce. That
nice.
It was like that. I think it was a Tarantino movie where he's like, I have to go back into the kitchen and kill the chef because we have to maintain order. I literally had that thought and laughed myself silly because It was just one of those experiences where I'm like, I'll never have another bowl of pasta like this again. And if I could eat that on a desert island, I'd be pretty damn happy.
I love it. I think that's probably the best answer I've had in all my years of asking that question. So thank you so much for that. Last but not least, please recommend a book that's impacted you in a personal or professional way.
Okay, so it's called Mr. Norris Changes Trains. It's by Christopher Isherwood. It was written back in the 30s. It takes place in Berlin. It's about a guy who kind of, it's hard to explain. There are like gay undertones to the whole thing. He's like running into Nazis and these sort of emerging fascist movement. There's a lot of intrigue and a kind of lots of personal drama, and it's not a very long book, and it's one of his Berlin stories. And to read it in the modern day, with such knowledge of what history actually turned out to be, it's sort of both a kind of very stylish thriller, but also kind of harrowing and scary in other ways.
What's the title again?
It's called Mr. Norris Changes Trains.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Yes. It's quite good, and you could read it on a train, on a nice train journey to wherever you are, with hopefully a much better outcome
yeah.
I read it a long time ago, and it was just like one of those things that stuck with me.
Sticks in your brain, yeah.
And if I could recommend one more.
Please.
It's slightly outdated now. It's back from 2008. It's called Deluxe: How Luxury Lost Its Luster, by the amazing fashion journalist Dana Thomas. Mm-hmm. And it really just sort of takes you through fashion and style and how things have changed. And even though it was written back in 2008, it's totally relevant today. For those people that, want to understand that kind of world of style, it definitely stuck with me, and it's a fantastic primer and sort of like into that world. Yeah.
It's not, I love fashion, and you wouldn't know it because I'm wearing a Wingnut Social t-shirt, but I love the whole art and the what's the word? I'm like not archaeology, the anthropology of it, the whole, cultures and how they live and how they dress. And then one of my favorite movies is The Devil Wears Prada. And I'm an observer, not really a partaker. I don't know if that's a lesbian thing or what, but I love it. I love that sounds like a fascinating read. Thank you for that.
That's all.
All right, Dan Rubinstein, please tell the audience again where they can go to find out more about you and the Grand Tourist, and we will call it a day.
Well, find me on Instagram at Dan Rubinstein or the Grand Tourist Podcast, and find us at thegrandtourist.net. And the Grand Tourist is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Dan Rubinstein. And I said Stein. My apologies.
That's okay. There is no right answer. There is no right answer, but I say Steen, but I accept both.
Well, in my defense, there was a pronunciation prompt in our intake, and I did not see an answer to that. So
because I don't, like Timothy Chalamet, I do not get hung up with Timothy versus Timothée. I think the funny thing is that when I do travel and I go to anywhere in Europe, in Italy, but especially any Germanic country, and I check into the hotel and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Dan Rubinstein. I have a reservation." They're like, they don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and then they find me on the computer and they're like, Herr Rubinstein, thank you, and they correct you and give you a little bit of a knowing wink. So I'm used to both, and I will accept both.
Well, you're a gentleman and a scholar, and I appreciate your tolerance for that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I have to tell you guys that after my conversation with Dan Rubinstein here, he asked to see my behind the green screen, which if you're a long subscriber to the show, is my collection of my 1/6 scale Star Wars, Marvel, and action figures. I know, I'm a grown woman child. And if you're new to the show, you might not realize that. But if you've listened for any time, you're pretty clued in to that. But so is he. Not a woman child. He's a grown man child, I assume. But he loves Marvel and all of that stuff. And I'm here for it, Dan. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show and giving us your over 25 years worth of expertise in this industry. And I love your holistic angle to the marketing about making sure that your budget is broken down into those categories. What is digital? What is print? What is photography? It's so important that you have a marketing plan and a structure to map out what you are going to do instead of just hoping, hey, this ad in AD or this article here, or I did this one post on Instagram. That's not really going to cut it for you. And shameless plug, that's what we do here at Wingnut Social in the digital marketing realm anyway, is we create marketing strategies for you to show up on your Instagram. So these influencers, these collaborators, these magazines, these brands will pick up and take notice of you because we do it with a marketing strategy, right? You can't just throw things out willy-nilly. You have to have a roadmap or you're not going to get to your destination. So if you would like to learn more about what we do here at Wingnut Social and how we can help you, head on over to wingnutsocial.com and hit that Let's Chat button. And let's have a convo. Let's have a convo and see how we can help you grow your business. All right, guys, that is it for this week. Remember, until next time, to get out there, get uncomfortable, and be great.